All right, history students, let's jump right into today's explainer. We're going to place ourselves directly in the middle of a deadly winter storm high up in the mountains of North Korea. It's the absolute last day of November 1950. United Nations forces have pushed deep into this treacherous mountain pass near the Chosin Reservoir, and they've walked straight into a massive trap. Now, what we're looking at today isn't just a breakdown of military tactics. It's a truly profound case study on human behavior, resilience, and what it actually takes to lead people when literally all hope seems lost. First things first, you have to understand the environment these guys were dealing with. Imagine trying to just stay alive when the temperature plummets to 40 degrees below zero. And with the wind whipping through those mountains, it felt like 70 below. The weather was a ruthless enemy all on its own. Truck batteries died instantly, cans of food froze completely solid. The men were wearing these things called shoe packs, basically rubber soles with leather tops. And they were the worst because they made your feet sweat when you marched and then freeze the absolute second you stopped. It was so cold that even their weapons froze shut. To fire a machine gun, a soldier literally had to kick the mechanism just to break the ice and get it working. And if the freezing cold wasn't terrifying enough, the Marines were completely surrounded. Roughly 400,000 Chinese troops had secretly crossed the border. In the dead of night, the silence of those frozen mountains was suddenly just shattered by the sound of bugles and whistles. Survivors later called it the scariest sound in the world. The Marines of Company G were hopelessly trapped, outnumbered 10-1. Honestly, it seemed like certain death was the only way this was going to end. Let's move into Section 1, the unlikely leader. The men of Company G did have one thing keeping them going, and that was their commander, Captain Carl Sitter. Now, Sitter was a pretty unlikely hero from Pueblo, Colorado. He wasn't your typical flawless, chiseled military specimen. He was actually described as being a bit pudgy, round-faced, and kind of out of shape. But as we'll see, he had this totally unique talent for shepherding his men through the absolute worst days of their lives. Think about his bizarre path to command for a second, because his luck was just wild. He enlisted at only 17, fought in World War II, and earned a Silver Star and 4 Purple Hearts. Pretty impressive, right? But by 1950, because he was out of shape, the top brass essentially demoted him to a desk job. He was put in charge of special services equipment, literally managing basketballs, footballs, and jockstraps. He begged them for a combat role, but they said no. Then fate stepped in. Right after he got to Japan, a typhoon quite literally blew all of his sports gear right into the ocean. With zero equipment left to manage, the brass really had no choice but to throw him right back onto the front lines. And his incredible survival streak is probably best summed up by this really strange habit of his. He constantly wore his pistol holstered right over his chest. Why? Well, during a battle back in World War II, he actually felt the heavy slam of a bullet hit his chest. He fully thought he was dead, but when he reached up, he felt the cold steel of his pistol. That gun had literally stopped a bullet from piercing his heart. So he carried that exact pistol, and that incredible luck, right into the frozen mountains of Korea. Which brings us to Section 2, a clash of leadership. We're going to focus on the Battle of East Hill because it builds into a fascinating case study. East Hill was absolutely crucial high ground. If the enemy took it, the Marines wouldn't get supplies and they'd be entirely wiped out. Sitter's company was sent up this icy rock to relieve another commander, and it gives us this rare, perfect opportunity to compare two wildly different ways to lead under extreme pressure. The contrast between the two commanders is just stark. Major Reginald Myers, the guy initially holding the hill, used really old-school coercion. By his own admission, he kicked his man and fired his pistol into the air just to force them to move. He was basically treating them like cattle. Captain Sitter took the exact opposite approach. When he took over the defense, he didn't hang back and scream orders. He moved from foxhole to foxhole. He talked directly to the troops, adjusted their machine guns, understood their terror, and just steadfastly supported them. At one point during the night, Sitter actually took grenade fragments to the face and chest, but he flat out refused to be evacuated because he knew his men desperately needed him there. And the results of these two styles? They speak volumes. Because of Major Myers' harsh, unsupportive methods, his men were looking for literally any excuse to get off that hill. They'd escort a wounded buddy down to the aid station and just never come back up. So by the time Sitter's company arrived to take over, Myers' entire force had been whittled down to a mere 75 men. Coercion had completely and utterly shattered their morale. Let's dive into Section 3, Courage Overcoming Fear. Facing wave after wave of intense hand-to-hand combat in the pitch black, illuminated only by these really sickly green flares, Sitter had a massive job. He didn't just have to manage the physical defense of the hill. He had to manage the intense psychological terror of his men. I mean, the enemy was right on top of them, stabbing with bayonets and tossing grenades. The truly crucial point here is that Sitter didn't pull some macho superhero routine. When his men looked at him with absolute hopelessness, he actively normalized their fear. He didn't pretend everything was fine. As he put it later, "If you're not afraid, you're stupid." I think everybody was afraid. He completely redefined bravery for them. For Sitter, true courage wasn't about lacking fear. It was about feeling the absolute bone-chilling terror of the situation, acknowledging how fragile life is when the guy right next to you gets hit, but choosing to overcome that fear and do your duty anyway. And this highly supportive, inclusive philosophy, that's exactly what saved them the next morning. Knowing that thousands more attackers were grouping up down in the valley, Sitter called for reinforcements, but there were literally no infantrymen left. Instead, command sent him this ragtag crew of cooks, bakers, engineers, and supply clerks, guys who were never, ever supposed to see frontline combat. Yet, Sitter was able to rally them, integrate them right into the foxholes, and help them hold the high ground. Section 4. Faith as a superpower. Now, you might be wondering, how in the world did an out-of-shape guy who was just managing jockstraps a few weeks prior inspire terrified supply clerks to fight like elite, hardened infantrymen against totally impossible odds? What was his secret? Sitter realized that his ultimate superpower wasn't physical strength. It wasn't even tactical brilliance. It was his total, unwavering faith in the potential of the people around him. He made a rock-solid promise that he would never, ever leave a single man behind. And because those troops knew he was perfectly willing to bleed and freeze right alongside them, they believed in him completely. What Sitter created was a virtuous circle of trust. It goes like this. Step 1, the leader shows absolute faith in the team, giving them a vital mission. Step 2, the team depends on that leader's promise not to abandon them, so they rise to meet those expectations. And step 3, by doing that, the team develops an unbreakable faith in themselves. They held that hill simply because Sitter made them believe they were entirely capable of holding it. This brings us to Section 5, Core Lessons on Empathy. As you all study this event and eventually step into your own careers, whether that's in business, politics, or whatever field you choose, there are incredibly powerful lessons to pull from Captain Sitter's actions on that hill, because truly, great leadership goes way beyond the battlefield. One of the absolute most striking things about Sitter's character came out after the battle was over. Instead of celebrating the slaughter of his enemies, Sitter looked across that battlefield at the frozen Chinese soldiers. He noticed they'd been sent into -40-degree weather wearing canvas tennis shoes with absolutely no socks. He realized they were being treated as nothing more than cannon fodder by their own commanders, and instead of hatred, he just felt profound sympathy and respect for their humanity. So, from this intense historical case study, we can extract 3 core lessons on empathy that will frankly make you an exponentially better leader. First, always try to see the fundamental humanity in everyone, even your adversaries or competitors. Second, lead by actively understanding and motivating your team through shared struggles, not by bullying or coercing them like Major Myers did. And third, build unshakable loyalty by making sure that absolutely no one on your team is ever left behind. For his extraordinary gallantry, taking shrapnel to the face and chest while continuously rallying his men, Captain Carl Sitter was awarded the Medal of Honor by President Harry Truman. But, entirely true to his character, Sitter humbly insisted that he didn't do anything special. He firmly believed that the real heroes were those terrified privates sitting down in the freezing foxholes, just waiting in the dark for the enemy to come. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a provocative thought to chew on for your own lives and careers. Carl Sitter proved that authentic courage isn't the absence of fear, and true leadership definitely isn't about domination. When you eventually face your own impossible odds, your own Chosin Reservoir, will you try to lead by force and coercion? Or will you, like Captain Sitter, find your superpower by leading through unshakable faith in the people around you? Something to think about. Catch you next time.